verse 1. I'd really like to hear what the translators, how they did this.
Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind. For he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin.
Okay.
Keep going, or just the first line?
Let's go through verse 2.
Okay. That he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh for the lusts of men, but for the glory of God.
All right. That's not a bad translation. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. However, it's not a literal translation. And I don't know that it's possible to give a literal translation of 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 1. So if that's not possible, then what are we going to do? Are you going to figure out what it means? There you go. How many of you were thinking that same answer? Excellent. Exactly. This will also be maybe a test of how well we know the church. So let's see here. Okay, this first clause in chapter 4 of Peter, verse 1. Can't remember what it's called. You remember? It's a genitival. It's a genitival construction. It's all the words are in the genitive case, and it would appear that it's your typical your basic genitival construction with which what would be an independent clause, a dependent clause, whatever. But it's Christ suffering, Christ, therefore, suffering in the flesh. It's given its grammatical or syntactical construction, it's set apart from the rest of the verse. It's set apart, but it's also the rest of the verse is in reference to it. Okay. Then it goes on. You also. And then there's this word. It's one word in the Greek, but in order to bring it out in the English, you got to use several words. And it's in the passive voice. Be equipped. The full sense of it would be for battle. Be equipped for battle. But obviously we're not talking about physical battle with enemy soldiers. We're talking about a spiritual battle. Be equipped for spiritual battle with armor. I mean, it has the idea of putting this armor onto yourself and being equipped there with that armor. Being equipped with that armor to do battle. And then the final clause in this verse is this. Because he who suffers in the flesh has ceased from sin. Okay, read the translation again, Dan.
From the beginning?
Yeah.
Okay. Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind. For he who has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin.
Okay. So that seems to line up with this, pretty much. Do you make sense of it, though? Can you make sense of it? Because he who suffers in the flesh has ceased from sin. Okay. Let's look at it more closely. It's what I do is I try to put myself in the mind of the Greek. I try to remove all English out of my head. Of course, it's an impossible thing, but that's what I try to do, so that I'm not impeded in my reading of the text with any English presuppositions that come to me from, that are mine from the English words that I use to translate it. So maybe it's an impossible, maybe it's a chaotic effort, but it's what I try to do. So I'm trying to read it. How would the Greek read it, who's not English, who's not immediately translating it into English concepts? So that means that I have to kind of like just soak in it. And this is what comes to me. So then, I actually don't start with Christ suffering in the flesh. That's not how I start the sentence. Because that's not the main subject of the sentence. It's as I said, it's in this genitival construction. The subject of the sentence is you. That's the word that is in the nominative case, the case for the subject of the sentence. So that's what I start with. So then, you, and then the verb. You remember? I mean, I don't know. Do they teach English grammar anymore? I started phonics in the 2nd grade, and I did English grammar all the way through the 8th grade. Not anymore. I think I was the last generation.
I heard the word phonics in high school.
In high school. Okay, well.
Yeah.
I adjuncted at colleges. I have adjuncted at colleges, and I was appalled at you know what I'm talking about.
I guess these days people think phonics is the capital of Arizona.
Yeah, that's. I know you're joking, but you're not. It's appalling. And it's a standard in graduate school. You cannot think if you can't write. And if you've tried to write, you have the experience of your thoughts becoming clear. Because you have to fight through, the cloud that's in your mind. All of this jumbled mess in your mind. You have to fight it through and untie all the knots when you're writing. And that clarifies what you're thinking. So if you can't write, you can't think. So no wonder our country is in a mess. So do you remember your basic grammar? Subject, verb. That's a complete sentence. So the subject is you, and the verb is this Greek word that has to be, the meaning of which has to be brought out in English by several words. So it would be, give me a minute, let's do this again. Okay, here's the subject of the verb, you. And then let's bring out the full meaning of this Greek verb. You be equipped for battle. You be equipped for battle with the armor of. You be equipped with your battle. Now we have this phrase here that gets in the way. Your intention, and the word is in noia. You'll recognize Noah, that Nia, as a a form of nous, the Greek word nous, which is translated often into English as intellect, or can be translated as spirit, but the nous in spiritual Christian Orthodox literature is the contemplative faculty of the heart. And so it is distinguished from the logos, which would be the thinking faculty of your mind. The heart is the inmost self. It's what Jeremiah the prophet calls it's the personal center. This is where you are deep, beyond all things, and it is the man. That's the heart. And the nous is the thinking part of the heart. In order to get to the heart, requires certain ascetic disciplines. You don't just waltz into your heart and start thinking from your heart. All of us think with our logos, if we even think. We think with our logos, which is the thinking faculty of the mind. That is, the thinking part of the organ of which is the brain, you might say. So we have this. So be equipped for battle, and then we have the enoia itself, or the very enoia, or the very intellect. So we have this, these Greek clauses that are thrown together that when you translate them into English in a literal way, they just don't really make sense. They don't really fit. That's why I make the effort to get away from the English and just kind of soak in the Greek to the degree that I can, since I'm not Greek and my Greek is not, it's not the greatest. I still don't know the Greek, but to the degree that I can, I do it. So here's what I come up with as I soak in it. I'm going to have to start over then. So then, it's a command. Be equipped, but as a passive voice, it can also be rendered into a middle voice. So we can say it like this: equip yourself. No, excuse me. Equip your. No. Equip your own intellect. That's how that's what I get when I'm soaking in the Greek. Soak or equip the contemplative faculty of your heart with for spiritual battle with the armor. Okay, now we have just brought out the full sense of this one Greek word. Equip for spiritual battle with the armor. That's bringing out the sense of one Greek word. Okay? So then equip your own intellect, your intellect itself, your heart itself, for spiritual battle with the armor. And now we can go to the first part of the sentence, which in the Greek is, as I say, in the genitive case, but now it seems to flow. With the armor of Christ, suffering in the flesh. Look at it closely. Dan, read that translation again.
Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm
Read it more
yourselves-
slowly so that we can, or, and also read it in your Bibles. Look at it in your Bibles. Keep going, Dan.
Therefore, since Christ suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same mind. For he who has suffered...
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Now, just listen closely. Do you feel differently? Do you get a different sense from what you're seeing in your Bibles and this? And if you are, describe it. Tim?
I just had a question about your translation. Is the suffering in the flesh referring to Christ or to us?
Christ.
So it's Christ suffering.
With the armor of Christ suffering in the flesh. Describe the difference that you feel in the meaning.
I get a picture of martyrdom.
Explain.
Well, with the English translation, it's all this intellectual debate. But when you explain it in the Greek, I actually can envision people suffering viscerally,
Okay? Okay?
as they had done in the early church.
All right. I feel like I know what you're trying to say, and I think you've got it. Tim?
I guess when I read it or hear you, for me, I think of this deep struggle between with our will, so that
Where are you getting the will?
What am I getting?
Yeah, no. As you're listening to this, where are you hearing reference to the will?
So then equip your own intellect for spiritual battle with the armor of Christ suffering. So it's a struggle between flesh and spirit.
Okay, but I want to push you. Where are you getting this? Where do you see the reference to the will? Yes. Because that's the origin of the will. That's where you make your choice deep down inside. So now, equip your intellect. Equip, your personal center where you make choices. Equip it for spiritual battle with what? With the armor of Christ suffering in the flesh, or the armor of Christ's cross. Now, Doug, tell me if this is the sense that you have in mind when you're describing the way you hear it. What I hear, the sense that I get when I hear what Dan is reading, is that here's Christ suffering in the flesh way back then as the example and as my inspiration. And here I am on my own. I'm trying to do the best I can just by emulating Christ. That's the sense that I get from what Dan read. Here, the sense that I get is that I'm clothing myself with Christ. He's not out there or back then. He's here and now as my armor itself. So the armor that I'm equipping myself is not just, an admiration for how Christ suffered in the flesh. The armor that I'm equipping myself with is Christ himself. Christ's very suffering itself. Is that consistent with what you're saying? So, yeah.
Did we have logos?
Well, there were good logismi as well. So, yes, he did, of course.
So if I understand this, so Christ's suffering is not his being persecuted for claiming to be the King of the Jews. His suffering is his internal fight with the fallen, the human will and...
I think it's referring explicitly to the cross. But of course, the cross encompasses the whole 33 years of his life.
So it would have been the temptations that he
Yes,
experienced
everything.
to get angry to, but was able to...
So it's the whole shebang. It's the cross, which is the complete, the completion of it. So, okay. Did you have a question?
Another thing that I think of when I think of the word armor is protection.
Right.
So this is how we protect
Yes.
ourselves.
Yes. But now, all right then, how do we clothe ourselves with the armor of Christ's suffering? So that it's not Christ over here suffering in his flesh and me over here suffering in my flesh and trying to endure the suffering by looking with admiration on Christ and trying to imitate him. How does it become so that it is Christ himself who is in me as my armor, and his very suffering that is in me as my armor? Dan?
The fast.
Thank you. The fast. Now, as again, I'm going to read this to you. I've read it to you before. This is just one, and perhaps the most explicit connection of the fast with the cross. It's just one of hundreds. And if you come to the vigil and you're listening to the verses for Vespers and for Matins, be attentive and hear how often we hear these verses that equate the fast or the fast with the cross. From the tree of the cross there grows for all the world the flower of abstinence. And so that there's no doubt in our mind, it continues. Let us then accept the fast with love and take pleasure in the fruit of Christ's divine commandments. I ask you to ponder how it affects your understanding of the fast when you understand the fast as the cross of Christ. It's the extension of Christ's cross into space-time, into your space-time. Now, what was it on, it was last Saturday, I think it was. I think it was at the, I don't know that it was in the Lenten Triodian. I think it was in the praises for Matins. But we had a couple of places here. In the verses for the praises, in an earlier verse, we heard about the armor of the cross. All right? The armor of the cross. And then about 3 or 4 verses later, we found this same construction, only now instead of armor of the cross, it was the armor of abstinence, or the fast. Again, from that same tone, we were in tone 7 of the Ektoikos last week. And again, I don't remember now where it was. It might have been in one of the odes for the Matins. I don't remember now. But we heard this, that Christ has granted to us as a gift. So the idea is he has given, let's say it, let's just bring it out. Christ has given us the gift of his cross. But now if the cross is the fast, to the question, how has he given the gift of the cross? I mean, honestly, don't you think about these things? How has he given the gift of the cross? Is that just rhetorical? Are we just being poetic? What's this cross as he's given to me as a gift? You know, we just blithely blithely, run through these verses and we don't stop to think, now wait a minute, what does that mean? The cross is the fast. Now just ponder for a moment. How does that change your understanding of the fast? Should you fast? Should you not fast? Is it optional? I mean, is it? What do you think?
What was the first thing that was given to man?
What's that?
It was the first thing that was given to man.
What do you mean?
Adam, he was told not to eat.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Abstain. Let him who would be my disciple deny himself and take up his cross. In other words, take up the discipline of abstinence.
Yeah, that's what I keep thinking, that's this self-denial, even for little things.
Yeah,
Like I get home during Lenten, like God, I want beer.
yeah.
So it's Lent, you can't have beer. And it's a fight,
All right.
but it's a, it's the old, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Now I'm going to suggest, Tony, that
I struggle over such little things, shows how weak I am, but it's still a fight.
it's a fight for all of us, whether it's big or large. It's a fight for all of us. But I would like to suggest that our understanding is defective. We're not understanding yet the fast and how it is applied, how it is taken up, and how it is used as armor. We don't understand that. I'm going to suggest that we don't understand, because we have never taken seriously the fact, as it's given to us explicitly in the liturgical text, if there's any question, that the fast is the cross. The cross is the fast. And I think because we don't understand it, we see the fast as an endurance contest. I have to endure the fast. How long can I endure it? How long can I go without eating any meat? Without eating any meat, dairy, wine, and oil? How long can I go? But let's think about it. If the fast is this flower of abstinence that grows for all the world from the tree of the cross, the fast is likened to a flower, all right? Where is the soil the flower is growing from? Let me read it again. Yes, from the tree of the cross, the wood of the cross. That's the root of the fast. So if I'm taking the flour and I'm in a sense, I'm eating the flour. Because, I'm eating it because I'm not eating, if you understand what I'm trying to say. This flour of the fast isn't something that we put in a vase and put on the counter and look at. The flour is something that we're doing with our stomach and our eyes and our ears and so forth and so on. So it's like we're eating the fast. We're eating this abstinence. We're eating the fast by not eating meat and dairy, wine and oil. So if I'm doing that, what am I eating? What am I receiving? What am I eating?
The cross.
The cross. The cross. I'm eating the cross. But not just the cross. How do we describe the cross? What is the cross all about? I should finish this. Christ has given us a gift of his cross as a weapon to defeat the devil. How do we describe the cross? Just throw some things out. Victory, okay? So we're eating the victory of Christ over the devil. What are some other things that we call the cross?
Christ's footstool.
Okay, it's the footstool of his judgment seat. So we're eating his judgment against us. What else? Exactly. Life-giving. How is it life-giving? He died. Come on now, tell me this. Explain that to me. By his death, he has destroyed death. So we're eating his death. But if we're eating his death, we're eating this death that empties the tomb of death. So we're eating this life-giving power. We're eating it. That's the point I want you to understand. If we're not doing the fast, how are we going to receive that power? Now it's just this intellectual, theoretical, poetic, romantic thing. Now we're in this attitude, and I'm going to suggest that this is the attitude that many of us are still into and that you described. We still think of the fast as an endurance contest. We don't understand that when I'm eating the fast, I'm actually imbibing, I'm taking into myself this energy, this life-giving energy. So then how does it work? Because come on, I get hungry and I want to eat. So what do? This is what I want.
At least when you empty yourself, it has to be filled.
It has to be filled, yes.
And that comes.
So now, we don't just say fasting, we say fasting and what? Pray. So what if we were to work asking the Lord to help us and to teach us on turning the fast into a prayer? So then what am I turning into a prayer? I mean, what is the fast? I mean, in real, concrete, everyday terms, what does the fast produce in me? It's not that, it's right in front of you, it's hunger. It produces hunger in me. So when I'm suggesting that we work to turn the fast into prayer, what's the implication? What am I saying? Take the hunger, turn it into a prayer. Tim, do you have something to?
I might be thinking about it wrong. The fast, it's like when you force yourself to do the fast, like the worst things come out in you, or your weaknesses come to light more. You can see the darkness in a little bit more illumination, and in a way you can see what you need to work on more. It's almost like a leak in a tire. You can't find the leak until you run water through it, right? And so like the fast forces us to give up meat and dairy, and then we become cranky, and then we begin to see where our failings are. Does that make sense?
Yes, I know what you're saying, but I don't know if I would stay on the truck with you when you talk about forcing me.
Well, when we take what I'm saying is, it's like a discipline. It's something that we do that the church prescribes so we can get insight in your language.
Yes, okay. I would suggest that we can fine-tune that.
Okay.
And actually get out of the sense of being imposed upon. That's what I hear you saying. Who of us, I mean, there is a sense in which I'm being imposed upon, but I don't have to accept that imposition. I can break the fast. Nobody's forcing me to keep the fast. But why do I break the fast? I don't like the hunger. And it can be a spiritual hunger too, a psychological hunger, not just a physical hunger. What change?
I don't want to change.
I don't want to change. And who would want to change? If what you have in front of you is this, I don't know, this Lord who's telling you you have to fast. I'm not going to like you if you don't fast. Who wants to worship that kind of a God? You know? I think that we should challenge ourselves. I think that we need to be fasting at least to the degree that we feel that we get to the point where we're feeling hungry, some level of hunger. But now, what's different about this hunger of the fast from, let's say, the hunger that comes from a diet? Can you think of anything how it's different?
A diet you're doing for yourself.
Thank you. Excellent. That's what makes it different. It's a sanctified hunger. You're taking on the hunger for the sake of Christ. It's a form of losing your life for the sake of Christ and his Gospels. Now,
Still for yourself, though.
well, yes, but how do you mean?
No, you're saying the difference is that that's for yourself. This is for ourselves.
How so?
Because I want to be saved. And
That's a healthy self-love. That's a healthy self-love.
Yeah.
There's a healthy self-hate. There's an unhealthy self-hate. There's a healthy self-love. There's an unhealthy self-love. But Christ himself gives it to us.
Yeah.
Whoever would save his life will lose it. You live for yourself, you're going to lose yourself. But whoever would lose his life for my sake in the Gospels, the same will find it. So why am I inspired to take up my cross and suffer the hunger, the discomfort of the hunger? It's because I want to be saved. Okay. So, if the hunger of the fast is a sanctified hunger, then I'm going to ask this should be a fairly obvious question. Who is present in the hunger? Christ is present in the hunger. Can you see how Christ is making himself present to you in a palpable way, in a way that you can feel, but he's making himself present to you in the hunger. So when you diss the hunger and break the fast and go eat something, who are you denying? Now it's like pincers. I'm putting pincers on you. I'm getting it tighter and tighter. Whoa. You're denying Christ. It's like what we say in the confessional. Don't conceal anything from me, lest coming to the physician you depart unhealed. You've taken on the fast. You've taken on the life-giving energy of Christ. You're eating the life-giving energy of Christ. Christ is giving himself to you in the fast. And then you break it, and it's like you're departing from Christ unhealed. You're not getting any advantage from the fast.
I do have a question.
Hang on. I want to finish this.
This is actually a question that's raised by other people.
No, I don't want to do that now.
All right.
I don't want to do that now. So if it is Christ who is present in that hunger or the discomfort, can you see? I mean, it would seem to follow logically that it is now possible, precisely in the midst of that hunger, to turn the hunger into a prayer, because Christ is right there. So what if, instead of letting the hunger take your intellect, logos intellect, whatever, to the counter for a snack, even if it's a Lenten snack, what if instead you laid hold of the hunger, as it were, and you turned that hunger that you're feeling towards Christ, and in your hunger started calling out to Christ, started praying to Christ. Now you turn the hunger into a prayer. Have any of you had the experience upstairs? Pre-sanctified liturgy, because you've been fasting all day. That's when you're going to feel it the most. Before you come to the pre-sanctified liturgy in the evening, you're feeling hungry. Your stomach is hungry. You can hardly wait for the potluck. But have you had the experience? Have you watched yourself that as you're standing in the worship of the church and the prayers begin, how suddenly the hunger just seems to dissipate? And instead of feeling hungry, you find that you're entering into the prayer more deeply. And you don't even think about the hunger. I would warrant that if you've not had that experience, it's because you're not paying attention. It's an indication that if by God's help, we have to ask God to help us, and I think even this is a gift of God, how to turn that hunger into a prayer. it would suggest that if we can do that, if we would do that, the hunger that we feel in the stomach would actually migrate. And we start feeling the hunger in our soul, if you will. And now suddenly the prayer takes fire. And you find yourself praying with a depth, with a fervency, with a desire that you've never felt before. To me, this makes sense. It's consistent with the phenomenon that you see when you read about the Holy Fathers and the saints of the Church. How did they become saints? It wasn't by indulging themselves. It was by taking up the cross of the fast, of abstinence. And isn't it interesting, I find it interesting, that after they had attained a certain level of spiritual longing, I'm thinking that under the instruction of their elder, they were, who's teaching them how to fast, not just to fast, but how to fast. He's teaching, I'm thinking how to fast, he's teaching them how to turn their fast into prayer. And it's interesting that as they go deeper into their ascetic discipline, they don't come to the point where they just kind of say, oh, okay, I'm done. I did that. I endured it long enough. Now I can go back and eat some steak. What do? They increase the fast. They want to. They beg the elder to let them go off, and into solitary, so that they give all their attention to prayer and fasting. They want to do that. What have they experienced that they would want to do that? I don't think they experienced this God who's saying, "You got to fast or I'm going to hate you." Mm-hmm. I think what they've experienced is the sweetness of Christ. They've experienced the sweetness of Christ that has filled their soul, that has satisfied the hunger of their soul. And now they want it more. And so they want to fast more. Because the more you're fasting, the hungrier you get. And the hungrier you get, the more your prayer can take flame. And the more your prayer can take flame, the more you ascend to God and God descends to you. I'm thinking that that's what it's all about. So now, so in the light of this experience of the church, let's read our passage again. Equip your heart, your inmost intellect. Equip it for spiritual battle with the armor of Christ suffering in the flesh. Because he who suffers in the flesh, in other words, he who takes up the cross of the fast, has ceased from sin. Why? I would offer it's because now my inner intention through the fast, and by working to turn the fast into prayer, my inner intention is no longer oriented back out into the world, into that Lenten snack in the fridge or on the counter. It's oriented wholly to God. I just don't have any space to sin. And I think it's also the case, it makes sense to me that if I am filling my soul with the armor of the fast, all of these things that you're describing, these things that, what you're describing is the light of Christ shining from his tomb into the tomb of my heart. And that's how I can see these things. But if I'm eating the fast, if I'm eating the cross, then it's the life-giving death of Jesus that is working on those things that I'm seeing. And that it's that life-giving death that's putting to death those things. I can't put them to death. The life-giving death of Jesus is putting them to death. But as I've clothed myself in this armor of the fast, which would be the armor of the light, I've shared with you in a couple of other venues, not necessarily here. The sun was darkened when Christ was crucified. From about the 9th hour on, the sun darkens. Well, 9th hour, that's about 3 p.m. That's generally when the sun is kind of at its strongest, isn't it? I mean, at the highest at the noon, but about 3 p.m. or so is when the temperature starts to rise because the sun is hottest. Well, I don't know. Is that the evangelist's way of saying that the one who's on the cross, the one who is himself the true light, who illumines everyone coming into the world, this light that shined in the darkness, but the darkness could not comprehend it. Is that the evangelist's way of saying that the light of Christ, as he was dying on the cross, began to shine forth so brilliantly that it darkened, that the sun was darkened. The sun was overwhelmed by the light of Christ shining from the cross. And that same light is shining from his tomb. Verse Luke 23, 54, whatever. There was the day of preparation, and the Sabbath was beginning to grow light. So when you arm yourself with the fast, you're clothing yourself also with this light of Christ. And when the things of the darkness come up against that light, they're just going to bounce back, or they're just going to be swallowed up. It's like, anything coming into the Earth's orbit from outer space, it goes through through that layer, those layers, it just burns up before it reaches the ground. If I'm clothing myself in the armor of Christ's cross, in the armor of his light, then all of these passions as they come at me are just going to burn up and they'll never get to my heart. So how do we do this? What I'm describing, I think, is pretty advanced. But I don't know, I feel that this is the teaching, that this is consistent, that this is faithful to the experience and the teaching of the church. How do we make our way to this? Okay, well, I'm going to suggest a little exercise that we might try this week, if not the rest of Lent. The next time you're feeling hungry, because you're fasting, just call to mind what the hunger of the fast is telling you. It's telling you that Christ is present. So, in that realization, work to lay hold of the hunger that you're feeling, let's say for 3 minutes. To lay hold of it for 3 minutes. And don't let your hand reach out to the fridge or to the counter. Don't let your legs take you out of your chair into the kitchen to looking for something to eat. Take that hunger and for 3 minutes, try to work on turning it into a prayer. Try to turn it inward so that the hunger migrates from the stomach into the soul. And now your soul begins to pray to the Lord with a fervency that it has not known before. All right? All right. We got to go.